We're going to start off by talking about the Baltimore Ravens' dominant win over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last night. And the final score would tell you that this game was a little bit closer than it actually was. The Buccaneers did put up a significant amount of points in the fourth quarter off of an onside kick and just some garbage time points that made this game a little bit closer than it truly felt. This game was pretty much all Ravens. Now, that being said, it was, of course, the Buccaneers who got out to a hot start early on. They took a quick 10-0 lead, and everything just sort of spiraled from there. And specifically, it seemed like it sort of spiraled from the moment that Mike Evans went down with a hamstring injury. He caught the first touchdown for Tampa Bay, and then it was on that second drive. Baker had made a throw to him towards the back of the end zone, and he ended up re-aggravating a hamstring injury that he had been dealing with coming into this game. You could see him being worked on a little bit on the sideline following that first touchdown, and then he did not get back up after that second one, and he is now expected to be out for a few weeks. And we don't have an exact timetable there, but it seems like it might be after their bye week a few weeks from now, which might be a bit of a disastrous problem for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at this point. We'll dive into the specifics of the game in a moment here, but losing Evans for the next few weeks, and then on top of that, in the final minute of the game, losing Chris Godwin with a dislocated ankle. It hasn't been quite confirmed yet, but that is what head coach Todd Bowles has said that it's looking like, and he is expected to miss the remainder of the season. So the Buccaneers lose each of their top two receiving threats, and it feels like this might be kind of the straw that broke the camel's back at this point. The Buccaneers are still a good, solid team, and I'm not fully writing them off just yet. But that being said, they are going to probably be without Godwin for the entire season now. Evans will likely be gone for the next few weeks as well. And the upcoming schedule for the Buccaneers, it goes versus Atlanta next weekend, and what could be a pivotal game for the division race. The Falcons won on Thursday Night Football a few weeks ago in Week 5 to get the one-up on Tampa Bay in that game, and now a season sweep might just be detrimental for the Buccaneers because obviously in the NFC, the wild card race is going to be extremely tough to fight your way into based off of how well the NFC North has been playing up to this point. The 49ers as well are potentially now in the mix for that wild card spot, and I think that the Buccaneers are in a lot of trouble as things currently stand. Now, I do want to circle back around to them, but I want to talk about this game in particular as well because this was yet another dominant game from the Baltimore Ravens. And again, I know that there was maybe some concern down the stretch of this game about would they be able to hold on to it. Personally, they pretty much had it wrapped up this entire time from that Derrick Henry touchdown with about 6.5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. They took a 41-18 lead. Yeah, Tampa is able to pour it on a little bit at the very end of the game, but this was, again, mostly all Tampa Bay, where they just, after that first drive of, them not being able to get themselves together, a crucial sack, the offensive line was getting pushed around a little bit, Baltimore was just able to be off and running, and it continues to be that two-headed monster of Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, where Lamar last night, one of the most impressive stat lines of his entire career, 17 of 22, 281 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, add another 52 rushing yards as well to that. Derrick Henry, 15 carries, 169 rushing yards, and then he had a receiving touchdown as well late in the game to sort of ice this one. So that combination has just been so deadly. And as much as, again, yes, in theory, the Buccaneers were sort of making things interesting down the stretch of this game, it really was the Ravens. And when you look at the usage of Derrick Henry, he wasn't being utilized all that much for a lot of this game. But ultimately he was able to yet again serve as almost this closer for the Ravens based off of the fact that he just continues to have these timely, big time plays late in the game that sort of ice this one out. In this game in particular, it was late in the third quarter. That point, 27-10 ball game, and Derrick Henry, backed up on his own 8-yard line, breaks off an 81-yard rush, which puts the Ravens in the red zone. They ultimately cap it off with a Mark Andrews touchdown. Mark Andrews, by the way, may be rearing a corner a little bit in terms of his overall level of production. 2 touchdowns in this game, adds on to the touchdown that he scored, I believe it was last week against the Washington Commanders. That really important to see for the Ravens of having Mark Andrews at least be a red zone threat. I don't think that based off of the way that this Ravens team plays and how much they look to be establishing the run game, that they don't need Mark Andrews to be any sort of a, receiving yards superstar in that 80 to 100 range and have the high volume that he had for so many years. It's more about just posing a threat for those big moments, third downs in the red zone. And, it's been encouraging to see for Mark Andrews to be able to step up his game a little bit. 3 consecutive games of 40 or more receiving yards, 3 touchdowns in the past 2 weeks. Ultimately, I think that is a very good sign based off of where Mark Andrews was at coming into the season. So, I think that sort of circling this back to Derrick Henry and his overall usage, Jim Harbaugh talked about it, or John Harbaugh, talked about it early on in the season, that Derrick Henry, the plan isn't for him to be this workhorse running back. And, when they've needed him, he's come through. It's not like he's been, 30 carries a game or anything like that, but he is still massively impactful. And again, it just feels like late in these games, obviously, like I mentioned, the 81-yard rush in this game, you go back to Cincinnati and the huge run that he had in overtime of that one to sort of set them up for the game-winning field goal then. Derrick Henry is basically the closer of this group, where the Ravens have always been a team that ultimately, they run when everything is on script for them. They play very well. They're able to sit on leads, milk the clock, use the run game to their advantage to kill clock. And, that's always sort of been the real strength of this Ravens offense. And, now adding Derrick Henry to that is just the ultimate sort of closing situation where it's so hard. And I understand the Ravens even still have maybe had some issues. That Raiders game in particular is the one that really got away from them. Some people point to the Cowboys and how, that game got a little bit closer than it had to. And ultimately, they did need to convert on a couple third downs to be able to hold on to that game. But they did so then. They do so in this game as well. I just feel like Derrick Henry is the perfect complement to Lamar Jackson. It's what we've been talking about since the moment he signed there in Baltimore. And I just think it's been a match made in heaven up to this point. So the Ravens are cruising at this point, now 5-2. They have taken the lead in the AFC North as well. Over the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now the Steelers are neck and neck with them even still. It's more so just that the Ravens have that divisional win to edge out the Steelers at this current moment. But, I think that this is the Ravens that we were more so anticipating coming into the season. Something that, we talked about a little bit in the preview yesterday this is something that we talked about on Friday more so in the best bets, because we did have Ravens minus 3.5, is that, the secondary and the passing defense still has not been great up to this point, and a lot of the stats coming in garbage time, albeit for Baker Mayfield, but the Ravens have still struggled in terms of passing defense up to this point in the year. And I am sort of having a hard time wrapping my head around why that might be, because they do have a pretty talented secondary with Kyle Hamilton, with Marlon Humphrey. Nate Wiggins has shown some promise as well. So the fact that they are struggling against the pass so much this year is a little bit of a surprise. I mean, the Ravens are still top 20 in pass rush win rate. It's not like they are getting zero pressure for them. And again, the secondary is good enough that something to be concerned about, I suppose, when it ultimately comes to the playoffs rearing its head there. So we will see. It is just sort of a long-term issue for the Ravens defense right now. We'll see ultimately, how this shakes out for them in terms of can they solidify that back end. But the Ravens are an incredible team, obviously. And, I think that for the most part, we can put sort of these worries about their team to rest. Now, on the Buccaneers side of things, like I mentioned, this is, by the way, just double checked. And obviously this is, not accounting for bye weeks or anything, but just quickly browsing here on NFL.com in terms of most yards allowed this season through the air. The Ravens are the worst team in the league with over 2,100. They are second to last in terms of yards per pass attempt allowed per game, 8.1. Only the Arizona Cardinals are worse. So that is certainly something to keep in mind as well with the Ravens. But on the Buccaneers side of things here, I'm very nervous for them. Their next 3 games against the Falcons, like we mentioned, and then it is at Kansas City and versus San Francisco. Those are 3 very tough matchups that they're probably going to be without their top 2 options. It's going to be a matter of, at this point, Liam Cohen, what are you made of as an offensive coordinator? One of his big points of emphasis coming into this Buccaneers team was being able to take the running game that was bottom of the league last season, at least make it into something that is more sustainable, which I do think that they have sort of been able to do up to this point in the year. And they're doing so with, now 3 running backs that are very capable for them. The emergence of Sean Tucker has been a big revelation for them. But between Rashad White, Bucky Irving, and Sean Tucker, these are 3 legitimate running backs that can give you a little bit of different looks in each of their own respective aspects. And that's what the Buccaneers are going to have to be reliant on. But I'm nervous. I feel like this is where we see Baker Mayfield try and bite off more than he can chew, get into a little bit more of an erratic version of himself. I sort of sometimes like to put it as a discount Josh Allen, where sometimes Baker, when he doesn't feel like he has the talent around him, can get a little bit run happy and, turn into a little bit more of a gunslinger. I mean, he's always been a gunslinger of sorts, but, I think that he can play more mistake-prone football when he's sort of backed into corners like this, and he might have to. So this isn't even necessarily a criticism of him. Options are pretty slim for him right now, so we'll see how this plays out. It's going to be basically in these next 3 weeks of the season for the Buccaneers. Got to win at least one of those games to stay alive in the race. Falcons coming off of a loss as well, so it's not like they're in some sort of an insurmountable division, but they need to focus on themselves right now. This is a game, obviously, that they're playing against the Falcons, but you have to just sort of reflect internally and find out what that game plan is going to be moving forward without your top 2 guys. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section as we're going to turn the page to the other Monday Night Football game from last night between the Arizona Cardinals and the Los Angeles Chargers, in which we saw the Cardinals pull off a bit of a comeback on that final drive, ultimately hit the game-winning field goal. So we're going to be diving into that, but before we do so, we're going to take a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.